I gave them a test, and they failed. Yeah, that's right. Imagine walking into your own business, the one you built with your bare hands, only to be treated like trash. Yeah, that's exactly what happened to Lucas Ibadistoi, a 40-year-old entrepreneur who decided to check in on one of his stores. And no, it wasn't just because he felt like it. He had already heard rumors, complaints, whispers that something wasn't right. This wasn't curiosity. This was necessity. He needed to know what the hell was going on in his own company. You know how it is, when something has cost you blood, sweat, and years of your life, and then you start hearing little things that don't sit right. And then comes that damn feeling in your gut, like a constant prickle in your head, poking at you, not sharp, but it wears you down. It nags at you, and you try to ignore it until one day you can't anymore. So that afternoon, with a rare gap in his schedule, Lucas decided to stop by one of his flagship stores. He had a feeling it would be worth it. What he didn't know was just how deep the problem ran. He could be bleeding money from the inside without realizing it. And if something's yours, you can't just look away. You have to face it. Now let's set the scene. This wasn't the first time Lucas had visited one of his businesses unannounced. He'd done it before, several times across different locations. He wasn't new to this. He'd dealt with issues before. Lack of productivity, bad customer service, a company culture that wasn't aligned with his values. But this time, it felt different. It was like expecting your wife to make you a beautiful meal when you get home, only to find out the best she can offer on Valentine's Day is a cold can of tuna. Lucas stepped out of his truck without anything flashy. No designer suit, no fancy shoes, just jeans, a cap, and a plain t-shirt. He looked like just another guy on the street, and that's exactly what he wanted. He walked through the main entrance of the boutique, one of his most exclusive stores. This was his crown jewel, sparkling glass windows, luxury scents in the air, everything carefully placed. But there was something else in the atmosphere. Tension, a selective kind of attention, service that wasn't for everyone, but only for those who looked like they had money. Lucas scanned the store in silence. He walked past racks of fine Italian leather jackets, ones he had personally approved in the seasonal catalog months earlier, and then, through the soft hum of ambient music and the scent of high-end perfumes, she appeared. Camilla. Camilla was the floor manager, tall, confident, dressed in an outfit that wasn't from the store but cost more than a week's paycheck. She moved like she ran the world, and maybe in that store she thought she did. She was the kind of person who only lit up when she thought you had something to offer. "Can I help you?" she said, smiling with all the warmth of an automated voicemail. "Just browsing," Lucas replied calmly. She barely hid her smirk, just a flicker of judgment in her eyes. Lucas caught it. She walked off, slow and disinterested, like he wasn't even worth her time. Lucas watched her walk away and said nothing. He kept browsing. He picked up a jacket, asked for his size. She took 15 minutes to bring it out, and when she did, she tossed it onto the counter like it was a thrift store return. "That's the only size we have," she lied. "Can I try it on?" he asked. "The fitting room's occupied," she lied again. Lucas looked over at the mirrors. 3 rooms, clearly empty. But he didn't argue. He slipped off his own jacket and tried the new one on right there in the middle of the floor. While buttoning it up, Camilla threw another line at him, this time with a smug little edge. "That jacket is $5,000, just so you know." Lucas nodded, didn't say a word. At that moment, a young couple walked in. He was wearing Balenciaga. She had a Fendi bag on her arm. Camilla vanished instantly, rushing over to them like a bee to honey. Lucas stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the sleeves, touching the fabric. He smiled to himself. Then he gently removed the jacket, placed it back on the rack, and walked up to the counter. "I'm not gonna take it," he said softly, almost politely. "Yeah, I figured," Camilla replied without even looking up. Lucas turned and walked out. And what happened next would not only flip that store upside down, but everyone inside it was about to learn exactly who they had just humiliated. The next day, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about his visit to the store. The arrogance of Camilla, the dismissive attitude of the staff. It gnawed at him. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He had built this empire from nothing, and now his own employees were treating customers like they were insignificant, especially if they didn't look the part. It wasn't just bad for business. It was a betrayal of everything he had worked for. So Lucas decided it was time to do more than just observe. He wasn't going to let this slide. He wanted to expose the truth, the way people were taking advantage of his absence, and how they were disrespecting the very foundation of the business. The following morning, he made a plan. He would return to the store, not as a customer, but as the man who owned it. This wasn't going to be some sudden reveal. He didn't want to shock anyone. He just wanted them to understand who they were really dealing with. Lucas took a different route this time. He wore a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, just like before. But this time, instead of walking in through the main entrance, he went through the back. He knew exactly how the store operated from the inside out. He had been hands-on from the very beginning, designing the layout, approving each product, each display. He even knew where the break rooms were. He had been everywhere, seen everything. Walking past the storage areas, he noticed employees gossiping in the break room. It wasn't a surprise. People tend to get comfortable when they think no one is watching. They were chatting about the latest drama in the store, making fun of a customer who had asked for a specific pair of shoes. They didn't know that the random guy they were talking about was the same person who had signed their paychecks. "Did you see that old man?" one of the employees said. "Came in yesterday asking for a jacket. Like, dude, who are you fooling?" Lucas clenched his fists, but he kept calm. He walked past the break room and into the back office, where he could hear Camilla's voice in a heated conversation with one of the other managers. "Just make sure they stay away from the good stuff," she was saying. "We don't need to waste time on people who can't afford it. Let's focus on the people who know what they're doing." She wasn't just talking about sales tactics. She was talking about the people. She was talking about his customers, the ones he cared about, the ones who trusted him, the ones he had designed this store for in the first place. Lucas couldn't take it anymore. He stood there, listening to the words dripping from her mouth like venom. His heart raced. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was disgusted. And this time, he wasn't going to let her get away with it. He stepped into the office without announcing himself. Camilla froze mid-sentence. The manager who was with her looked up, wide-eyed, and immediately recognized the man in front of them. He was wearing a hoodie, but the confidence in his posture, the calmness in his eyes, they all screamed authority. They both knew who he was. "Is something wrong?" Camilla asked, her tone suddenly switching to polite, forced sweetness. Lucas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly walked towards the desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed. He looked at both of them, not with anger, but with cold resolve. "I was just hearing a very interesting conversation," he said softly. The manager nervously glanced at Camilla, but Lucas could see the fear in their eyes. They knew they had crossed a line. "Look, I don't know who you think you're talking to," Lucas continued, "but I own this place. This is my business. And if you think I don't care about the customers, you've been ignoring. If you think I don't care about the reputation you're tarnishing, well, you're mistaken." Camilla tried to respond, but her words caught in her throat. The manager, on the other hand, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Lucas wasn't here to shout. He wasn't here to make a scene. He was here to show them exactly who they were messing with. "I'm not here to make threats," Lucas said, his voice steady, "but I am here to fix things. If you think this is just another job for you, if you think that treating people however you want is acceptable, then maybe it's time for you to find somewhere else to work." There was a silence that hung in the air. It wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that settles when the truth is finally spoken. Lucas stood there for what felt like an eternity, letting the weight of his words settle in. Finally, Camilla broke the silence, her voice now trembling. "We're sorry. We didn't mean any harm. It won't happen again." Lucas nodded, then turned to leave. But as he reached the door, he paused for a moment. "Oh, and one more thing," he said without looking back. "If you ever underestimate a customer again because of the way they look, you'll be out. No second chances." And with that, he walked out of the office, his heart still racing. But this time, it wasn't anger that filled him. It was something else, something that made him feel in control. The next few days were quiet, and Lucas couldn't shake off the feeling of both relief and unease that lingered after his confrontation. He had put things in motion, but something still felt unresolved. The employees had been forced to show a little more respect, but Lucas could tell their attitude hadn't changed deep down. They hadn't learned anything. They had just been scared into silence. That wasn't enough. He needed them to understand the gravity of their actions. Despite the tension, business seemed to pick up again. Customers came and went, as they always did. The store felt more alive, as if the changes Lucas had demanded were starting to reflect in the energy of the place. But as the days went by, Lucas began to hear whispers. The customers were speaking, and they were saying that something was off. The people who had been ignored, treated poorly, those who had been made to feel invisible, were noticing the subtle shifts. They were seeing the improvements, but the feeling of something deeper being wrong didn't leave him. That was when it happened. Lucas had been so caught up in his internal battle that he had missed it. A customer, a regular one who had been coming to the store for months, came to him one afternoon while he was reviewing inventory. She had been a loyal patron, and Lucas had always appreciated her business. Her name was Susan. She was in her early 50s, a sharp woman who had an eye for quality. Susan had always been quiet, but she was observant, and today there was something about her demeanor that seemed off. "Lucas," she said softly, catching his attention as he looked up from his paperwork. "I need to talk to you about something important." Lucas set his papers aside, feeling a slight sense of unease as he met her gaze. He could see she was uncomfortable, but there was also a weight in her eyes, something she wanted to get off her chest. "What's on your mind?" Lucas asked, trying to mask the nervousness creeping up on him. Susan hesitated before speaking again, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been a regular here for a long time, and I've always enjoyed shopping at your store. But lately, things have changed, and not in a good way." Lucas's heart sank, and his mind raced back to the conversations he'd overheard. He had a feeling this was about more than just a few disgruntled employees. It was something deeper, something that had been building for a long time. "Go on," he urged, his voice low and calm. "I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but—" Susan paused, her words careful. "There's a lot of discrimination here. I know you're probably aware, but I don't think you realize the extent of it. People like me, people who don't fit the image of what your staff thinks a real customer should look like, are treated differently. We're given the cold shoulder, we're ignored, or worse, we're talked down to." Lucas stood still, processing her words. For a moment he couldn't speak. He had always believed his business was about creating a welcoming environment, about offering quality to everyone, no matter who they were. But hearing Susan's words, it hit him like a ton of bricks. He had been so focused on the internal drama with his staff that he had never taken the time to consider how his customers truly felt. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Lucas asked, his voice tinged with frustration, not at her, but at himself. He could have prevented this. He should have known. Susan's eyes softened. "I didn't feel like anyone would listen, and honestly, I didn't want to make things worse, but I can't ignore it anymore. It's not just a few bad apples, it's the whole atmosphere of the store." Lucas swallowed hard. He had heard the complaints, the rumors, but hearing it from someone who had been so loyal to his business, it cut deeper than anything else. It was like a mirror had been held up to him, and he didn't like the reflection staring back. "I'm so sorry," Lucas said, his voice sincere but filled with guilt. "I had no idea it was this bad. Thank you for telling me. I promise you I'll make things right." Susan gave him a small, almost sad smile. "I know you will. I just wanted you to understand what's happening." As she walked away, Lucas stood frozen in place, the weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't just about Camilla or the managers anymore. It was about the culture he had allowed to fester, a culture that had undermined everything he had built. The discrimination, the favoritism, the cliquishness. It wasn't just in his staff's behavior. It was in the very core of his business. And now, Lucas had to make a choice. He could ignore it, like he had done for so long, or he could face it head-on, confront the reality of what his store had become, and fix it from the ground up. He had already failed once, but this was his chance to get it right. Lucas didn't sleep much that night. His mind raced, replaying Susan's words over and over again. The weight of her confession hung heavy in the air, refusing to leave him alone. The next morning, as the sun began to rise, Lucas sat in his office, staring at the business's numbers, reports, and the messages from employees. It all seemed so trivial now. Everything he had focused on, the sales targets, the product inventory, even the new marketing strategies, felt irrelevant compared to the bigger issue that had just been laid bare before him. His business was built on a foundation of exclusion, not inclusion. He had turned a blind eye for too long. He called a meeting, not just with the managers, but with every single employee in the store. Camilla, the rude sales associate, Javier, the manager who had turned a blind eye, even the cleaning staff. Lucas wasn't going to hold back anymore. It was time for an awakening, for him and for everyone else involved. When the day's shift started, Lucas gathered everyone in the back room. The staff shuffled in, exchanging glances, unsure of what was about to unfold. The tension was palpable, but Lucas didn't care. This was necessary. "Everyone, take a seat," Lucas said, his voice firm but calm. He let the silence hang for a few moments before continuing. "I've been hearing a lot of things lately. Complaints from customers, rumors about the way you treat people, and I've finally come to realize that this business is not the place I thought it was. It's not the place I want it to be. We're losing something here, something that can never be replaced. Trust, respect. And I'm here to tell you that this is no longer acceptable." He let the words settle before looking at the room full of confused faces. "I'm not here to point fingers, but I need to be clear. This is your warning. If I hear one more complaint about how customers are treated, if I see any more of the behavior I've been hearing about, this will be the last day you work here." The room was still for a long moment. Then Camilla, the very person who had humiliated Lucas during his surprise visit, broke the silence. "What are you talking about?" she scoffed. "We're just doing our job." Lucas met her eyes, no longer the quiet, passive owner he had once been. There was a fire in his gaze now, a quiet anger simmering beneath the surface. "No, Camilla, you're not doing your job. You're doing exactly the opposite. You're making our customers feel like they don't matter, and that's something I cannot and will not tolerate in my business." Her expression faltered. For the first time, she seemed taken aback. The other employees remained silent, unsure of how to react. But Lucas could see the cracks starting to show. The smugness that had defined Camilla's behavior was evaporating before his eyes. "I think it's time for you to realize that this business doesn't belong to you," Lucas said, his voice growing stronger. "It belongs to all of us, the customers, the employees, the people who trust us, and if you can't respect that, if you can't see the damage you've done, then it's time for a change." Camilla's face turned red, her eyes narrowed. "You can't do this. I've worked here longer than you. You think you can just come in and start telling everyone how to do their jobs?" Lucas stepped closer, his voice unwavering. "I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm telling you how to treat people. And if that's a problem for you, then maybe this job isn't for you." The tension in the room grew thick, but Lucas didn't back down. He knew this wasn't just about firing Camilla. This was about setting a standard for the entire business, about showing the employees that respect wasn't optional. It was mandatory. "You'll have one more chance to prove yourself," Lucas continued. "But it won't be because I'm doing you a favor. It will be because you choose to do better. You choose to treat our customers with respect." Camilla stood there, seething with anger. The other employees exchanged uncertain glances, but no one dared speak up. Lucas could feel the power shift, the subtle hum of tension in the air, the kind that had been present for far too long, was starting to fade. He gave them all a final look, his gaze stern. "Now get back to work, and remember, things are different now. Things have to change." As they dispersed, Lucas remained behind, his mind already racing with the next steps. There was still much to do, much to rebuild, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was in control. It wasn't about profit margins or customer satisfaction alone anymore. It was about making things right, making the business something he could be proud of again. And the first step was confronting the truth. As the day wound down, Lucas stood up from his desk, determination in his heart. He wasn't going to wait for things to fix themselves. He was going to make sure they changed, for good. He had already taken the first step. Now, it was time to finish what he had started. The days following the meeting were tense but revealing. Lucas kept his distance, observing from afar how his employees adjusted, or rather how they didn't. Camilla's behavior shifted in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. But the change was there. She no longer flaunted her disdain for customers, though the bitterness in her eyes was hard to miss. It was as though she were biding her time, waiting for her moment to strike back. Lucas watched, keenly aware that actions spoke louder than words. He knew that the real test was yet to come. Words could be a temporary fix, a band-aid, but actions would reveal the true nature of his team. Would they rise to the challenge, or would they revert to the old ways? It didn't take long for the first real test to present itself. One afternoon, as the store was particularly busy, a well-dressed woman walked in. She was clearly a regular, someone Lucas had seen before. She stepped up to the counter with a smile, greeted by Camilla. But as the transaction began, Lucas saw it. The slight eye roll, the dismissive tone. The customer's request was simple. She asked for a particular size of a jacket that wasn't on display. It was a common enough request, nothing out of the ordinary. But Camilla, with all the grace of a bull in a china shop, snapped, "We don't have it. Try somewhere else." Lucas froze. This was the moment. He could feel his blood boil, the pressure building behind his temples. The moment he had feared, the test that would determine if his actions had been enough to change the culture of his business. He stepped forward, slow but deliberate, as the customer began to walk away, clearly offended. The room seemed to slow down. It was almost as if everything had fallen into place in that one instant. He was done. Done with the indifference. Done with the lack of care. Without a word, Lucas approached the counter and caught the customer's attention. "Ma'am," he said with a steady but firm voice, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Let me see if we have that size in the back." The woman, surprised by his interruption, turned around. There was hesitation in her eyes, but Lucas could tell she appreciated the effort. He motioned to the employee who was closest to him, a young man named Javier, who had been silent throughout the entire ordeal. "Javier, please go check in the back for the jacket." Lucas turned his attention back to the woman, who was now visibly more relaxed. "I want to personally ensure you get the best service possible today." "Thank you," the woman replied, her posture softening. As Javier rushed to the back, Lucas couldn't help but glance over at Camilla, who was standing by, her face pale with fury. But instead of saying anything, Lucas simply gave her a look, one that told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about the store. It was about the customers, about what they deserved, and about what Lucas had promised himself to stand for. Javier returned moments later, the requested size in hand. Lucas handed it to the woman with a smile. "Here you go, ma'am. We're grateful for your patience, and I hope this fits perfectly." The woman tried on the jacket and smiled. "It's perfect. Thank you so much." Lucas could see the relief in her eyes. She felt heard. She felt valued, and that's all anyone really wanted. He watched her leave the store, a sense of accomplishment flooding him. He wasn't just a businessman. Today, he had been a leader, someone who made a difference, however small. But his attention quickly shifted back to the reality of the situation. Camilla was still standing at the counter, arms crossed, eyes burning with resentment. Lucas knew this was just the beginning. Her pride had been wounded, and no one likes to have their ego bruised. He also knew that the bigger problem lay in the fact that the issue wasn't just Camilla. It was a culture that had been allowed to fester for far too long. Later that day, Lucas found himself sitting in his office, making a list of what needed to change. It wasn't enough to just address the immediate concerns. He needed to make long-term changes to ensure that his business wasn't just about sales, but about respect. He needed to create a place where every employee and every customer felt valued, where professionalism and kindness came first. It was then that he realized how far he had fallen from the vision he had once had. Somewhere along the way, the business had become more about the bottom line than about people. It had been about profits, margins, and growing the empire. And in doing so, he had sacrificed the most important thing of all, humanity. But this wouldn't be a business of cold transactions anymore. He was going to rebuild it from the ground up, and it would be stronger than before. It would take time, patience, and effort. But Lucas was committed now. His employees, his customers, they deserved better, and he was going to deliver as the day woon. Lucas didn't expect the road back to control to be easy. Camilla, once trusted, had turned bitter. She didn't hide it. Her looks, her words, even her silence were sharp. But Lucas wasn't there to argue. He was there to rebuild. Not just a store, but a standard. A culture. One of the first things he did was hold a team meeting. Not to talk numbers, but to talk values, respect, service, pride in the brand. He wasn't just asking for more effort. He was asking for better hearts. Surprisingly, many welcomed the change. The toxic vibe was gone. They felt they could finally breathe, except Camilla. Her resentment only grew. Lucas noticed her glares, her attitude, but he stayed focused. He didn't need a fight. He needed results. Until one afternoon, he walked in and saw it. Camilla arguing with a customer, tense body language, raised voices. Lucas stepped in immediately. "I'll take it from here," he told her. She shot him a look of pure hate, but walked away. The customer was upset. Lucas listened, apologized sincerely, and offered them a free item to make it right. The customer softened, surprised. It wasn't the freebie, it was the respect. That moment made things clear for Lucas. You can't lead with fear. You can't grow from ego. And Camilla? She was holding everyone back. Later that day, he pulled her aside. "I think it's time we part ways," he said. "You're firing me?" she snapped. "No," he replied calmly. "I'm letting you go. This isn't about punishment. It's about alignment. We're building something different now, and you don't want to be part of it." She left without another word, and when the door closed behind her, the store felt lighter. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Staff were motivated, customers felt the shift, sales improved. Yes, but more than that, there was pride in the air. People smiled more, helped each other more. They believed in what they were building. Lucas stood at the front one afternoon, watching it all, and realized this was the real win, not money, not titles, but earning back the soul of something he had almost lost. End of story. If you got this far, it's likely that you liked the story. If so, I would ask you to support me with a like, please. It doesn't cost you anything, and you will help me continue creating more content. Thanks. See you later in the next story.